The stars screamed. Admiral Kane of the Altarian Federation watched his fleet burn through the bridge windows of the peaceful dawn. 20,000 ships had entered this system just 3 hours ago. Now less than 500 remained, scattered, like dying embers across the void. "Sir, the bioships are moving to the next formation," reported his communications officer, her blue skin pale with fear. They're eating the wreckage." Kane closed his 4 eyes and tried not to think about the crews aboard those destroyed vessels. Good people, peaceful people who had never wanted to fight anyone. But the Devour Swarm didn't care about their peaceful nature. The swarm only cared about consuming everything in its path. "Open a channel to all remaining ships," Kane ordered. "Full retreat to Rally Point 7. The bridge crew worked quickly, their 6-fingered hands dancing over crystal control panels. The Altarians had perfected energy manipulation thousands of years ago. Their ships ran on pure light, their weapons fired concentrated starfire, and their shields could stop almost anything, except the swarm. Kane had watched those biomechanical monsters adapt in real time. When his ships fired energy beams, the swarm ships grew new organs that absorbed the energy and made them stronger. When his ships used gravity weapons, the swarm ships changed their structure to flow around the attacks like liquid metal. The enemy learned, the enemy evolved, and the enemy never stopped coming. "Sir, we're receiving a priority message from High Command," the communications officer said, her voice shaking. Kane straightened his tall, thin frame. "Put it through." The holographic image of Supreme Commander Vel appeared above the bridge table. The old Altarian looked tired, his usually bright silver hair now dull with stress. "Kane," Vel said, "I need you to fall back to the core systems immediately. We're abandoning the Outer Rim." Kane felt his stomach drop. The Outer Rim contained over 300 inhabited worlds. Billions of innocent people lived there. "Sir, what about the civilians?" "We're evacuating what we can," Vel replied, but his voice carried no hope. "The Keth Empire has offered to help with their merchant fleets, but there isn't enough time. The swarm moves too fast." Kane knew about the Keth Empire. They were traders and builders, not fighters. Their ships were designed to carry cargo across the galaxy, not to fight wars. Still, they were trying to help save lives. "What about the Vex Collective?" Kane asked. "Surely their technology can find a solution." Vel's expression grew even more grim. "The Vex have been studying the swarm for months. They've run every calculation, tested every theory. Their conclusion is that the swarm cannot be stopped with current galactic technology. The bioships adapt too quickly to any weapon we use against them." The line went quiet for a moment. In the background, Kane could hear alarms and voices shouting orders. Even the capital world was preparing for the worst. "Kane," Vel continued, "I'm sending you new orders. You and the other surviving fleet commanders are to implement Protocol Final Hope." Kane had heard whispers about Protocol Final Hope, but he had never seen the actual orders. "Sir, what exactly does that involve?" "We're going to send out a distress call to the entire galaxy. Every frequency, every language we know, broadcast on continuous loop. We're asking for help from anyone who can provide military assistance." Kane felt a chill run down his spine. "Sir, that will reveal our location to every unknown species in the galaxy. We could be inviting something worse than the swarm." At this point, Kane, "I don't think anything could be worse than the swarm." The transmission ended, leaving Kane alone with his thoughts and his dying fleet. 2 days later, Kane stood in the emergency council chamber on the planet Harmony. The great crystal dome above showed the night sky, where refugee ships from a dozen worlds hung in orbit like lost children. Around the circular table sat the leaders of the 3 great galactic powers. Ambassador Kell represented what remained of the Altarian Federation. Scholar Prime Vex spoke for the collective's research stations. Trade Master Lorik came on behalf of the Keth Empire's merchant guilds. "The distress signal has been broadcasting for 48 hours, Scholar Prime Vex reported. His people looked like tall, gray-skinned humans with oversized heads full of incredible intelligence. "We have received responses from 17 known species, but none can offer military assistance. They are all facing the swarm in their own Territories. Trademaster Lorik, whose people resembled upright lizards with colorful scales, hissed in frustration. My merchant fleets have evacuated 4 million civilians, but the swarm destroyed 3 more systems yesterday. We cannot save them all. Ambassador Kell, the most diplomatic of Kane's people, maintained her calm voice. Then we continue broadcasting. Somewhere in the galaxy, there must be a species with the military strength to help us. The probability is low, Scholar Prime Vex said, consulting his data tablet. We have mapped 80% of the galaxy. Most species follow similar technological development paths. Energy manipulation, gravity control, quantum mechanics. The swarm has evolved to counter all known forms of advanced warfare. Kane spoke up from his position near the window. What about unknown forms of warfare? The 3 leaders looked at him. Explain, Scholar Prime Vex said. The swarm adapts to our technology because it's based on the same principles every advanced species uses. But what if there's a species out there that developed differently? What if they use techniques we've never seen? Trademaster Lorik's scales changed to a doubtful purple color. Any species capable of interstellar travel must have mastered the same basic technologies we have. Energy manipulation is required for faster-than-light travel. There is no other way. Kane wanted to argue, but he knew Lorik was probably right. Every spacefaring species they had ever met followed the same general pattern of development. First, they learned to manipulate matter, then energy, then gravity and space-time itself. It was the natural progression of scientific advancement. Sir, Kane's aide approached quietly. We're receiving a response to the distress signal. The room fell silent. Put it through, Ambassador Kell ordered. The communication system crackled to life, filled with static and interference. Then a voice came through, speaking in a language none of them had ever heard. The translation software worked for several seconds before providing subtitles. Unknown vessels, this is Deep Space Monitoring Station Echo 7 of the Terran Defense Network. We have received your distress call and are forwarding it to High Command. Please provide your coordinates and tactical situation. Message repeats. This is Echo 7 of the Terran Defense Network. The 4 leaders stared at each other in shock. Terran, Scholar Prime Vex whispered. I have never heard of this species. Trademaster Lorik's scales shifted to excited yellow. A new species. Perhaps they have not encountered the swarm yet. They could provide sanctuary for our refugees. But Kane noticed something the others had missed. Did you hear what they called themselves? The Terran Defense Network. Not Exploration Service, not Scientific Collective, not Trade Federation. Defense Network. Ambassador Kell nodded slowly. They identify themselves by their military organization. Curious, Scholar Prime, Vex mused. Most peaceful species do not prioritize military identification in first contact situations. Over the next 6 hours, they exchanged messages with the Terrans. The aliens learned that this new species came from a world called Earth, located in an unexplored arm of the galaxy. The Terrans asked detailed questions about the swarm's capabilities, tactics, and technology. Their questions were unusual. Most species asked about the swarm's energy patterns or quantum signatures. The Terrans asked about physical composition, structural weak points, and something they called blast radius effectiveness. Finally, a new message arrived. Altarian vessel Peaceful Dawn. This is Admiral Blake of the Terran vessel Retribution. We are en route to your coordinates. Estimated arrival in 72 hours. Maintain current position and prepare tactical briefing materials. Be advised, we are coming armed for full military engagement. Kane read the message 3 times. They're actually coming, he whispered. 1 ship. Trademaster Lorik said sadly. Against thousands of swarm vessels. Perhaps they have allies following behind, Ambassador Kell suggested hopefully. Scholar Prime Vex was already running calculations on his tablet. Based on their message pattern and transmission strength, I estimate their vessel displacement at approximately 2,000 meters, modest size for a warship. Kane stared out at the stars, wondering what kind of people called themselves a defense network and traveled across the galaxy to fight someone else's war. In 72 hours, he would find out. The stars still screamed, but now, perhaps for the first time in months, They also whispered hope. Captain Torres stepped through the airlock of the alien ship and immediately felt wrong. Everything was too clean, too bright. The walls glowed with soft blue light that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The floor felt warm beneath. His boots and the air smelled like flowers from a garden he had never seen. "This is definitely not a warship," he muttered into his helmet radio. "Copy that, Captain," came Admiral Blake's voice from the Retribution. "Stay alert. Remember, we don't know their intentions yet." Torres looked back at his escort team. Sergeant Miller carried a standard assault rifle, while Corporal Jackson had a shotgun slung across his back. Both weapons looked crude and primitive, compared to the crystalline walls around them. An alien approached them from down the corridor. Torres had seen the pictures during the briefing, but seeing one in person was different. The Altarian was tall and thin, with blue skin that sparkled like starlight. She had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on her face, and her movements were graceful like a dancer. "Welcome aboard the Peaceful Dawn," she said in perfect English. "I am Communications Officer Zara. Admiral Kane is waiting for you in the council chamber." Torres nodded. "Lead the way." As they walked through the ship, Torres noticed more things that bothered him. The corridors were wide and open, with no defensive positions. The crew members they passed wore flowing robes instead of uniforms. He saw no weapons, no armor, no security checkpoints. "Officer Zara," Torres said, "how many crew members are on this ship?" "Approximately 8,000, she replied. "The Peaceful Dawn is a colony ship that was converted for military use when the swarm arrived." Torres stopped walking. 8,000 people on one ship? How do you feed them all? Where do they sleep? Zara smiled with what Torres assumed was kindness. "Our ships are grown, not built. The biomatter adjusts itself to provide everything we need. Food, shelter, even air and water are produced by the ship's living systems. Your ships are alive?" "In a sense, yes. We merged our technology with organic materials centuries ago. It is much more efficient than the old methods of construction." Torres felt a chill run down his spine. Living ships. He made a mental note. To report this to Admiral Blake immediately. They entered a vast chamber with a ceiling that showed the stars outside. Around a circular table sat 3 aliens of different species. Torres recognized them from the briefing files. Admiral Kane stood up first. He was even taller than Officer Zara, with silver hair and kind eyes. "Captain Torres, welcome. I am Admiral Kane of the Altarian Federation." The gray-skinned alien with the large head spoke next. "Scholar Prime Vex of the Collective. We are pleased to meet representatives of your species." The lizard-like creature with colorful scales nodded. "Trade Master Lorik of the Keth Empire. Your arrival gives us hope." Torres saluted crisply. "Captain Torres, Terran Defense Network. I'm here to assess the tactical situation and coordinate with Admiral Blake." The 3 aliens exchanged glances. Scholar Prime Vex leaned forward. "Captain, we must ask, how many ships is your species sending to assist us?" "Just one," Torres replied. The silence that followed was uncomfortable. "Just one?" Admiral Kane asked carefully. "The Retribution is our response to your distress call." Torres confirmed. Trademaster Lorik's scales changed to a worried brown color. "Captain, perhaps you do not understand the scale of the threat. The swarm has thousands of ships, each one capable of destroying entire fleets." "I understand perfectly," Torres said. "Admiral Blake has reviewed all the tactical data you provided. We're confident we can handle the situation." Scholar Prime Vex activated a holographic display above the table. "Captain, perhaps you should see what we are facing." The hologram showed a battle scene. Hundreds of elegant alien ships fired beams of pure energy at dark, twisted bioships. The swarm vessels absorbed the energy attacks and grew larger. When the aliens switched to gravity weapons, the bioships simply flowed around the attacks like liquid. "These recordings are from the Battle of Nexus Prime," Scholar Prime Vex explained. "We lost 3,000 ships in 6 hours. The swarm adapted to every weapon we used." Torres watched the display with professional interest. "Impressive. They're Like a biological computer virus, but in space. Captain, Admiral Kane said gently, your ship appears to be quite small compared to our vessels. How exactly do you plan to fight the swarm? We have our methods, Torres replied. Now I need to know about your evacuation procedures. When the fighting starts, how quickly can you get your civilian ships to safety? The three aliens looked at each other again. Captain, Trademaster Lorik said slowly, you keep talking as if victory is certain. But the swarm has never been defeated. Every species that has fought them has either been destroyed or forced to retreat. Then they haven't fought humans yet, Torres said simply. Officer Zara, who had been standing quietly by the door, spoke up. Captain, may I ask about your weapons? Our sensors show that your ship uses some kind of chemical propulsion system. Very primitive. Torres smiled. Primitive is one word for it. How do your weapons work? Scholar Prime Vex asked. Do you use energy manipulation, gravity distortion, quantum field generators? We use kinetic force, Torres replied. The aliens looked confused. Kinetic force? Admiral Kane asked. You mean, you throw things at your enemies? In a manner of speaking, yes. Scholar Prime Vex's large eyes blinked several times. Captain, kinetic weapons were abandoned by most species thousands of years ago. They are inefficient compared to energy-based systems. That depends on what you're trying to accomplish, Torres said. But how do you achieve faster than light? Travel without energy manipulation? Trademaster Lorik asked. How do you power your ship? Torres thought about how to explain nuclear reactors to beings who had never heard of splitting atoms. We use controlled explosions. Explosions? Officer. Zara looked horrified. That sounds extremely dangerous. It can be, Torres admitted, but it's also very effective. Admiral Kane leaned back in his chair. Captain, I appreciate your confidence, but I think you may not fully understand what we're facing. The swarm learns from every battle. If your kinetic weapon fails to stop them, they will adapt and become immune to that type of attack. They can adapt to things they've seen before, Torres said, but they can't adapt to things that kill them completely. What do you mean? Scholar Prime Vex asked. Torres stood up and walked to the holographic display. He pointed at one of the swarm ships. Your energy weapons feed them power. Your gravity weapons just move them around. But what happens when you hit something so hard that it stops existing? The room fell quiet. Captain, Admiral Kane said carefully, are you suggesting that your species uses weapons designed to completely destroy targets? All weapons are designed to destroy targets, Torres replied. The question is how efficiently they do it. Trademaster Lorik's scales shifted to a pale yellow. Captain, most galactic species have moved beyond destructive warfare. We prefer to disable enemy vessels so that conflicts can be resolved diplomatically. Torres stared at the alien. You're trying to negotiate with a species that eats planets? Well, no, but then you need to start thinking about destruction instead of diplomacy. Officer Zara spoke up hesitantly. Captain, your species sounds very aggressive. Are you certain you wish to help us? We are peaceful people. Torres softened, his tone slightly. Ma'am, my species has been fighting wars for thousands of years. We've learned that sometimes the only way to protect peaceful people is to be very, very good at destroying the things that threaten them. Admiral Kane stood up slowly. Captain Torres, I think it would be best if you return to your ship. We need to discuss this situation among ourselves. Of course, Torres said. But Admiral, I suggest you start moving your civilian ships to a safe distance. Admiral Blake plans to engage the swarm in approximately 18 hours. 18 hours? Scholar Prime Vex looked shocked. But we haven't finished analyzing their attack patterns. We don't need to analyze them, Torres said as he headed for the door. We just need to kill them. As Torres and his team left the alien ship, he heard Trademaster Lorik whisper to the others, what kind of species treats warfare like a simple problem to be solved? Torres smiled inside his helmet. The kind that wins, he said quietly. Back on the Retribution, Admiral Blake was waiting in the briefing room. Report, Captain. Sir, they're not warriors. They're gardeners who got forced into a fight they don't understand. Blake nodded. And the enemy? Adaptive bioships that learn from energy-based attacks. They've never faced kinetic weapons or chemical explosives. Perfect, Blake said. Signal the fleet. Tell them we're going hunting. Torres paused. Sir, there's something else. The aliens think we're crazy. Admiral Blake smiled coldly. Captain, anyone who brings a knife to a gunfight is going to think the guy with the gun is crazy. Right up, until they're dead. The Retribution continued its approach to the battlefront, carrying with it the concentrated fury of a species that had turned warfare into an art form. Dr. Hayes stared at the alien battle recordings for the 100th time, her coffee growing cold on the lab table beside her. The Retribution's science officer had been studying the swarm for 3 days straight, and what she found both fascinated and terrified her. Computer, replay Section 7 Alpha, she commanded. The holographic display showed a close-up view of a swarm bioship taking direct hits from Altarian energy weapons. Hayes watched as the creature's hull absorbed the energy and immediately began growing new organic structures. Within minutes, the ship was not only repaired, but actually larger than before. Incredible, she whispered. They're not just adapting, they're evolving in real time. The lab door opened and Admiral Blake walked in. The commander of the Retribution looked tired but alert. He had been studying tactical reports while Hayes worked on the scientific analysis. What's your assessment, Doctor? Blake asked. Hayes turned away from the display. Admiral, these things are biological computers. Every time they encounter a new weapon, they instantly develop a defense against it. Energy absorption, kinetic deflection, even quantum field manipulation. They've seen it all. But they haven't seen our weapons yet, Blake said. No, sir. And that's what gives us an advantage. Hayes activated a new display showing the periodic table. Admiral, every advanced species in the galaxy follows the same technological path. They start with basic chemistry, then move to energy manipulation, then to quantum mechanics. It's the natural progression. Blake nodded. And once they master energy weapons, they abandon the old methods. Exactly. Chemical explosives become obsolete when you can fire concentrated starlight. Kinetic weapons seem primitive when you can manipulate gravity itself. Hayes pointed to the battle recordings. The swarm has evolved specifically to counter advanced galactic technology, but humans never fully abandoned the old ways. We just made them better, Blake said with a slight smile. Hayes activated another display showing technical specifications. Admiral, I've been analyzing our weapons compared to what the aliens use. Our nuclear warheads produce temperatures of 100 million degrees. The aliens' energy weapons produce temperatures of maybe 10 million degrees. And the kinetic penetrators? Our railgun slugs hit with more force than anything the swarm has ever encountered. The aliens use gravity weapons that push and pull. We use weapons that simply destroy whatever they hit. Blake studied the data. What about their regeneration capabilities? Hayes shook her head. That's the key point, Admiral. The swarm can regenerate from damage. They can rebuild destroyed sections, regrow lost organs, even reproduce entire ship systems, but they can't regenerate from nothing. Complete molecular destruction, Blake said. Exactly. If there's nothing left to regenerate from, they can't adapt to it. The intercom crackled to life. Admiral Blake to the bridge. Priority alert. Blake left the lab and walked quickly to the command center. Captain Torres was waiting at the tactical station, looking grim. Report, Blake ordered. Sir, we've reached the Nexus system. The alien fleets are in position, but we have a problem. Torres activated the main display. The screen showed space filled with thousands of ships. The combined fleets of 3 galactic civilizations hung in defensive formations around a massive space station. But beyond them, at the edge of the system, something else was coming. Dear God, whispered Lieutenant Ross from the navigation station. The swarm approached like a living nightmare. Thousands of bioships moved through space in perfect coordination. They looked like a cross between sea creatures and machines with organic hulls that pulsed with dark energy. Some were small and fast, darting around like predatory fish. Others were massive, kilometer-long monsters that could swallow entire cruisers. Estimated enemy count, Blake asked. At least 8,000 ships, sir. Possibly more hiding behind the main formation. Blake watched the tactical display. The alien fleets had maybe 2,000 ships total. Even with their advanced technology, they were outnumbered 4-1. Sir, Communications Officer Park reported, we're receiving a transmission from Admiral Kane. Put it through. Kane's holographic image appeared on the bridge. The Altarian looked even more worried than before. Admiral Blake, the swarm has arrived sooner than expected. Our scouts report they've adapted new defensive measures since the last battle. They're stronger than ever. Understood, Admiral Kane. Are your evacuation ships clear of the combat zone? Most of them, yes. But Admiral, I must ask again, are you certain one ship is enough? We could delay the battle until more of your fleet arrives. Blake looked at his bridge crew. Every officer was focused on their station, calm and professional despite the overwhelming odds. These were people who had trained their entire lives for moments like this. Admiral Kane, this is our fleet. We're ready to engage. Kane's four eyes blinked in what Blake assumed was confusion. Admiral, I don't understand. How can you be so confident? Because, Admiral Kane, we're very good at what we do. The transmission ended. Blake turned to his weapons officer. Commander Reed, status report. Commander Reed, a stocky man with gray hair and steady hands, checked his displays. All weapon systems online, Admiral. Nuclear torpedoes armed and ready. Railgun batteries loaded with depleted uranium penetrators. Kinetic bombardment system. Standing by. Plasma cannons. Charged and ready, sir. Point defense systems are active. Blake nodded and opened a general communication channel. All hands, this is the Admiral. In approximately 1 hour, we will engage a hostile force that has terrorized this galaxy for months. These creatures have adapted to every form of advanced warfare known to galactic civilization. He paused, looking around at his crew. But they've never fought humans before. They don't know that we've spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing things that need to be killed. They don't know that our primitive weapons can crack planets in half. And they don't know that when humanity goes to war, we don't fight to disable or capture, we fight to win. The bridge was silent except for the hum of electronics. Today, we show the galaxy what human warfare looks like. Today we remind the universe why peaceful species should be grateful that we're on their side. Blake sat down in his command chair. All stations, prepare for combat operations. On the main screen, the swarm continued its approach. The bioships moved with predatory grace, confident in their superiority. They had destroyed every enemy they had ever faced. They had adapted to every weapon, survived every attack, consumed every world in their path. But they had never met the species that invented warfare and then spent millennia making it into an art form. Admiral Kane watched from his flagship as the small human vessel moved toward the center of the defensive formation. The Retribution looked tiny compared to the massive alien ships around it. Its hull was dark gray metal instead of living crystal. Its weapons were simple-looking tubes and boxes instead of elegant energy projectors. Sir, his tactical officer, reported, the human ship is requesting all friendly vessels move to minimum safe distance. How far is minimum safe distance? Kane asked. There was a pause while the officer translated the human measurements. Approximately 50,000 kilometers, sir. Kane stared at the tactical display. 50,000 kilometers? What kind of weapons require that much safe distance? He was about to find out. The swarm reached the outer edge of the system and began to accelerate. Thousands of bioships surged forward like a tide of living darkness. Their hulls began to glow as they prepared their adaptive weapon systems. On the bridge of the Retribution, Admiral Blake watched the enemy approach with cold calculation. Range to target? He asked. 2 million kilometers in closing, Lieutenant Ross reported. Sir, Commander Reed said, the enemy formation is spreading out. They're trying to surround us. Blake nodded. Let them come. The more spread out they are, the more we can hit at once. He leaned forward in his chair. All weapons prepare to fire on my command. The swarm ships began to glow brighter as they entered their attack formation. Energy patterns danced along their organic hulls as they prepared to unleash the same devastating attacks that had destroyed hundreds of fleets. "Admiral," Captain Torres said quietly, "they're beautiful in a way, like deadly ocean creatures." Blake smiled coldly. "Captain, in 30 seconds they're going to learn why humans are the apex predators of this galaxy." He opened the fleet communication channel one last time. "All vessels, this is Admiral Blake. Clear the engagement zone immediately. Retribution is going weapons hot." The human ship charged directly into the center of the swarm formation, alone against 8,000 enemies. It was exactly where humanity wanted to be. 3 hours after the battle, Admiral Kane still couldn't stop his hands from shaking. He stood in the observation deck of the Peaceful Dawn, staring out at the debris field that had once been the swarm fleet. Clouds of glowing plasma drifted slowly through space like the ghosts of 8,000 nightmares. In the distance, the human ship Retribution hung motionless, its dark hull showing no signs of damage. "Sir," Communications Officer Zara said softly behind him, "the humans are requesting a diplomatic meeting. They want to discuss the situation." Kane turned away from the window. "Where do they want to meet?" "They've invited all 3 species representatives aboard their vessel." Kane felt a chill. After what he had just witnessed, the idea of being inside a human warship terrified him. But he was a leader, and leaders had responsibilities. "Inform Scholar Prime Vex and Trade Master Lorik. We'll meet them at the airlock in 1 hour." The inside of the Retribution was nothing like the alien ships. Where Altarian vessels were filled with light and living beauty, the human ship was dark and functional. The corridors were narrow and lined with pipes and cables. The walls were painted a dull gray color, and everything smelled like metal and electricity. Kane walked between Captain Torres and a human soldier who carried a weapon Kane didn't recognize. Behind him, Scholar Prime Vex and Trade Master Lorik moved in nervous silence. "Your ship is very practical," Scholar Prime Vex observed, trying to make conversation. "It's designed for war," Captain Torres replied simply. "Everything else is secondary." They entered a briefing room where Admiral Blake waited at a metal table. The human admiral looked exactly like Kane had expected, calm, professional, and completely unbothered by the fact that he had just committed genocide against an entire species. "Gentlemen," Blake said, gesturing to chairs across from him, "please sit." The 3 alien leaders sat down carefully. The chairs were hard and uncomfortable, designed for function rather than comfort. "Admiral Blake," Kane began, "on behalf of the Altarian Federation, I want to thank you for your assistance. You saved millions of lives today." Blake nodded. "You're welcome." The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Trademaster Lorik's scales shifted to a cautious orange color. "Admiral, we must ask, how many ships does your species possess?" "That's classified information," Blake replied. "But surely you can give us some indication of your military capabilities?" Scholar Prime Vex pressed. "The galactic community will want to know about humanity's strength." Blake considered for a moment. "The Retribution is one of 12 vessels in its class. Earth's defensive fleet numbers approximately 400 ships of various types." The aliens exchanged glances. Kane felt his stomach drop. 400 ships like this one?" he asked weakly. "No," Blake said. "The Retribution is our newest design. Most of our fleet consists of older vessels with less advanced weapons." Scholar Prime Vex leaned forward. "Less advanced than what we just witnessed?" "The first-generation ships only carry fusion warheads instead of antimatter weapons, and their railguns are limited to 15% of light speed." Kane realized he was holding his breath. Trademaster Lorik's scales had turned pale yellow. "Admiral, what is the size of human territory?" "Currently, we control 237 star systems," Blake replied, "though we're expanding into new sectors regularly." The briefing room fell silent except for the hum of the ship's systems. Scholar Prime Vex spoke first. "Admiral, your species controls more territory than the entire Altarian Federation. And you have more military ships than all 3 of our species combined." Trademaster Lorik added. Blake shrugged. We've been busy. Kane found his voice. Admiral, if humanity is so powerful, why haven't we encountered you before? Why haven't you made contact with the galactic community? Blake's expression grew slightly amused. Because we've been fighting each other. Fighting each other? Scholar Prime Vex looked confused. Humanity isn't unified the way your species are, Blake explained. We have dozens of different nations and political systems. We spend most of our time arguing with each other about borders, resources, and ideological differences. You mean, Kane said slowly, you use these weapons against other humans? Constantly, Blake confirmed. The Retribution was originally designed to fight the Mars Colonial Alliance. Before that, we had the Jupiter Mining War, the Titan Independence Conflict, and the Great Asteroid Belt Dispute. Trademaster Lorik's scales were now completely white. You've been having wars in space for how long? About 300 years, give or take. Scholar Prime Vex calculated quickly in his head. Admiral, if humanity has been fighting wars with these weapons for 3 centuries, your species must have an incredible understanding of military tactics and strategy. Blake nodded. We've learned a few things. Kane realized that everything he thought he knew about warfare was wrong. The galactic species had abandoned military conflicts centuries ago in favor of diplomatic solutions. They had kept their weapons for defense against unknown threats, but they had never actually used them in anger. Humans, on the other hand, had been perfecting the art of killing for their entire spacefaring history. Admiral, Kane said carefully, what are humanity's intentions toward the galactic community? Do you plan to expand your territory into our space? Blake looked genuinely surprised. Why would we want to do that? You're not threatening us, and conquest is expensive. We prefer to fight people who actually deserve it. But surely humanity wants something in return for your assistance today, Trademaster Lorik asked. Blake considered this. We're interested in establishing trade relationships. Some of your technologies could be useful for civilian applications, and we're always looking for new markets for our industrial products. Scholar Prime Vex looked relieved. Trade we can do. The collective has many scientific innovations that could benefit your people. What kind of industrial products does humanity manufacture? Trademaster Lorik asked, his merchant instincts taking over. Blake smiled slightly. Weapons, mostly. The alien leaders stared at him. You manufacture weapons for export? Kane asked. It's one of our major industries, Blake confirmed. Different. Human nations have different specialties. The European Union makes the best energy weapons. The Asian Confederation produces superior kinetic systems. The American Federation leads in missile technology. Trademaster Lorik's scales shifted to an interested green. There might be a market for human weapons among species who face external threats. Perhaps, Blake said. But we'd need to establish formal diplomatic relations first. Scholar Prime Vex leaned forward eagerly. The Galactic Council would be honored to welcome humanity as a member species. Your technological contributions would be invaluable. Blake shook his head. I don't have the authority to make that decision. You'd need to negotiate with Earth's government directly. Of course, Kane said quickly. We would be happy to send ambassadors to your homeworld. That can be arranged, Blake replied. Though I should warn you, Earth politics can be complicated. The meeting continued for another hour, covering trade agreements, territorial boundaries, and communication protocols. By the end, Kane felt like his understanding of the galaxy had been completely overturned. As they prepared to leave, Scholar Prime Vex asked one final question. Admiral Blake, may I ask why your species decided to help us? You could have ignored our distress call and remained hidden. Blake stood up and walked to a small window showing the debris field outside. Scholar, my people have been fighting wars for thousands of years. We've learned that there are 2 types of beings in the universe, those who protect the innocent and those who prey on the weak. He turned back to face the alien leaders. The swarm were predators. You were innocent. The choice was simple. Kane felt a strange mixture of fear and gratitude. Humanity was the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever encountered. Their casual attitude toward massive destruction was terrifying. But they had used that terrible power to protect people they had never met. "Admiral," Kane said, "I hope our species can build a lasting friendship." Blake nodded. "So do I. But remember this, Admiral Kane. Humanity didn't save you because we're peaceful. We saved you because we're good at war." As the alien delegation returned to their ships, Kane realized that the galaxy had just gained its most powerful protector. The question was whether the other species would be wise enough to stay on humanity's good side. On the bridge of the Retribution, Admiral Blake watched the alien ships preparing to depart. Captain Torres joined him at the observation window. "Think they'll cause us any trouble, sir?" Torres asked. Blake smiled. "Captain, after today, I think they're more afraid of making us angry than anything else in the galaxy. And Earth's reaction to all this? They'll want to know if there are any other threats out here worth fighting." Torres chuckled. "I'll prepare. The report. Should I mention that we might have accidentally terrified 3 entire civilizations into permanent friendship?" Blake thought about it. "Captain, sometimes the best way to keep the peace is to be very, very good at war." The Retribution turned toward home, carrying with it the news that humanity was no longer alone in the universe. More importantly, it carried the message that the galaxy now had guardians who would answer when innocent people called for help. The first nuclear torpedo left the Retribution at 0947 ship time. Commander Reed watched the weapon streak across space toward the nearest swarm bioship. The torpedo was small compared to the massive alien vessels, barely visible on the tactical display, but Reed knew what was inside that simple metal casing. "Impact in 15 seconds, he reported calmly. Admiral Blake stood behind the weapons console, his hands clasped behind his back. Around the bridge, every officer watched their displays with professional focus. No one spoke. No one moved unnecessarily. The torpedo hit the swarm ship dead center. For a split second, nothing happened. Then space itself seemed to catch fire. The nuclear explosion created a miniature star that burned at 100 million degrees. The bioship simply vanished. Not destroyed, vanished. Where a kilometer-long alien vessel had been floating 1 second before, now there was only expanding plasma and radiation. "Target eliminated," Reed announced. The swarm formation paused for just a moment, as if confused by what had just happened. They had adapted to every weapon the galaxy had thrown at them. Energy beams made them stronger. Gravity weapons barely moved them. Quantum attacks were absorbed and redirected. But nothing in their evolutionary history had prepared them for the raw fury of a splitting atom. "Fire pattern alpha," Blake ordered. Reed's fingers danced across his control panel. "Pattern alpha, firing now." 20 nuclear torpedoes launched simultaneously from the Retribution's missile tubes. They spread out in a wide formation, each one targeting a different swarm ship. The biovessels tried to move out of the way, but the torpedoes were guided by human technology that had been perfected through countless wars. 20 miniature suns bloomed across the battlefield. When the light faded, 20 swarm ships had ceased to exist. Not damaged, not disabled, completely removed from reality at the molecular level. On the bridge of the peaceful dawn, Admiral Kane watched in stunned silence. His tactical officer, a young Altarian named Vex, stared at her displays. "In disbelief, sir," Vex whispered. "Our sensors show complete matter conversion. The swarm ships aren't just destroyed, they're gone." Kane had fought the swarm for months. He had seen their ships regenerate from the worst damage imaginable. He had watched them grow stronger after every attack. But this was different. There was nothing left to regenerate from. "What kind of weapons do this?" he asked no one in particular. The swarm began to react. The remaining bioships shifted their formation and charged toward the lone human vessel. Energy patterns rippled along their hulls as they prepared to unleash their adaptive weapons. But the Retribution wasn't finished. "Railgun batteries. Target the leading edge," Blake commanded. Lieutenant Commander Steele, the ship's gunnery officer, locked onto the approaching swarm vessels. Targets acquired. Firing. The railgun system was humanity's answer to long-range precision warfare. Magnetic fields accelerated depleted uranium slugs to 20% of light speed. Each projectile carried the kinetic energy of a small asteroid. The first salvo of railgun rounds crossed the distance to the swarm in seconds. The bioships tried to activate their adaptive armor, the same organic defenses that had turned aside every kinetic weapon the galaxy had ever used. The uranium slugs punched through their hulls like they were made of paper. The rounds didn't just penetrate the swarm ships, they liquefied everything they touched. The kinetic energy was so massive that the bioship's organic matter was instantly converted to superheated plasma. Entire sections of the alien vessels simply ceased to exist. Multiple hits confirmed, Steele reported. Estimate 70%. Kill ratio on first salvo. Blake nodded. Continue firing. Don't give them time to adapt. The railgun batteries fired again and again. Each shot removed another swarm vessel from existence. The bioships tried desperately to evolve new defenses, growing thicker armor and energy shields. But there was no defense against pure kinetic force delivered at relativistic speeds. The swarm ships began to spread out, trying to present fewer targets. Some of them returned fire with their bioenergy weapons. Streams of adaptive plasma and quantum disruption fields lanced toward the retribution. The human ship's point defense systems activated. Close-in weapon systems designed to stop incoming missiles opened up with streams of depleted uranium bullets. Each gun fired 4,000 rounds per minute, creating walls of metal that intercepted the swarm's energy attacks. The bullets absorbed the bioenergy and continued on their ballistic paths, striking swarm ships and punching holes through their hulls. Point defense is holding, reported Chief Petty Officer Martinez from the Defensive Systems Station. All incoming fire neutralized. Blake watched the tactical display as the swarm tried new attack patterns. The bioships were learning, adapting their strategies in real time. But they couldn't adapt to weapons that simply erased them from existence. Sir, Commander Reed said, the enemy formation is trying to surround us. Should we evade? Blake smiled, coldly. Commander, when has humanity ever run from a fight? He activated the ship's intercom. All hands, prepare for kinetic bombardment operations. In the weapons bay deep inside the Retribution, automated systems began loading the ship's most devastating weapons. Kinetic bombardment rods, simple tubes of tungsten and titanium designed to be accelerated to incredible speeds. The concept was ancient in human terms. Take a heavy object and throw it very, very hard. But humanity had refined the idea over centuries of warfare. Each rod was perfectly balanced, magnetically accelerated, and guided by targeting computers that could track a coin from orbit. Bombardment. System ready, Reed reported. Fire. The kinetic rods launched from the Retribution like vengeful lightning bolts. They accelerated to speeds that made railgun slugs look slow. When they hit the swarm ships, the results were catastrophic. Each impact released the energy of a small nuclear weapon, but without the radiation. The bioships simply exploded into fragments that were then vaporized by the kinetic energy transfer. Entire sections of the swarm formation disappeared in seconds. Admiral Kane watched the slaughter from his bridge, unable to comprehend what he was seeing. The unstoppable force that had terrorized the galaxy for months was being systematically annihilated by a single human vessel using weapons that any galactic species would consider primitive. Sir, his communications officer said, we're receiving a message from Scholar Prime Vex. Kane activated the channel. The gray-skinned alien's image appeared on his screen, his large eyes wide with shock. Kane, Vex said, his voice barely a whisper. Are you seeing this? I'm seeing it, but I don't believe it, Kane replied. The humans. Their weapons. They're using controlled nuclear fusion as a standard attack, and those kinetic projectile, the energy release is beyond anything in our databases. Kane watched as another group of swarm ships vanished under human fire. How is this possible? Their technology appears so primitive. Primitive? Vex's voice cracked. Kane, they've weaponized the fundamental forces of the universe. They're not using energy manipulation or quantum mechanics. They're using the raw power of atomic destruction and relativistic physics. On the Retribution, Admiral Blake calmly observed the battle's progress. The swarm had lost over half their ships, and the survivors were beginning to show signs of panic. Some biovessels were trying to flee, while others continued their futile attacks. "Commander Reed," Blake said, "prepare the plasma cannons." Reed's eyes lit up. The plasma cannons were the Retribution's most advanced weapons, designed specifically for targets that conventional weapons couldn't handle. "Plasma systems charging," Reed reported. "Target selection?" Blake pointed at the largest swarm ship, a massive biovessel that was trying to coordinate the remaining enemy forces. "That one. Show them what happens when humans get serious about warfare." The plasma cannons fired. Twin beams of contained stellar fire reached across space and touched the swarm command ship. The biovessel's hull began to glow, then melt, then transform into superheated gas. The ship didn't explode. It simply converted from solid matter to plasma in a process that took less than 3 seconds. The remaining swarm ships stopped moving. For the first time in their species' history, they had encountered something they couldn't adapt to, couldn't overcome, couldn't survive. "Sir," Captain Torres said quietly, "the enemy formation is breaking up. They're trying to retreat." Blake shook his head. "No survivors. We can't risk them learning from this encounter and adapting." The Retribution continued its methodical destruction of the swarm fleet. Nuclear torpedoes, railgun slugs, kinetic bombardment, rods and plasma beams reached out across space like the weapons of an angry god. Each shot removed another piece of the threat that had terrorized civilized space. 47 minutes after the battle began, the last swarm ship died in nuclear fire. Space was quiet, except for the expanding clouds of plasma that had once been 8,000 biovessels. Admiral Kane stared at his tactical display, which now showed empty space where the swarm had been. His hands shook as he activated the communication system. "Retribution, this is Admiral Kane. Do you require assistance?" Blake's voice came back calm and professional. "Negative, Admiral Kane. All targets eliminated. The Nexus system is secure." Kane looked around his bridge at the shocked faces of his crew. They had just witnessed the complete